Pakistan is now on the cusp of a general election, which in a few months' time will lead to a new government being installed. And a new government always means new beginnings and new opportunities. I think one critical area for the new government to deal with is going to be the number of foreign policy challenges that confront Pakistan. And in order to face these challenges, to figure out how best to address them, what is needed today is a broad-ranging review of our foreign policy. It's needed because the world itself has been changing so rapidly and radically in recent decades, in fact, in recent years also. So we see geopolitical shifts in the Middle East, we see rapprochement between regional states, we see the defining strategic dynamic of this century, which is the standoff between China and the United States. And of course, we see multilateralism under growing stress. So, all of this means that we have to take stock. And it's not clear when the last wide-ranging review of our foreign policy was undertaken. I believe it was, certainly well over a decade ago. And in this very decade, we've seen fundamental regional and global changes. Now, I think sometimes the review is misunderstood to mean that there's going to be a change in objectives. No, it's not a change in objectives. It really means or involves adjusting policy, adapting policy to changes that are taking place in our region, in the world, and then recrafting our strategy to more effectively and more efficiently pursue our foreign policy goals. Because, as of now, issues tend to be addressed in silos, foreign policy issues. So the need is to look at some of these critical relationships that we have with key countries in a wider context. Because when you see them in a silo, then it has pretty apparent drawbacks. Also, I think the foreign ministry needs greater investment. I think one of the fundamental goals of the review should be to align ends and means, because if you do not align or evolve a strategy which aligns the country's goals to its diplomatic resources, then you're not going to go very far. And in any case, I really believe that foreign policy cannot be conducted on the cheap. So it's important to undertake this review because in recent years, Pakistan's foreign policy basically consisted of ad hoc responses to issues as they arose, rather than reflect a well-considered, well-thought-out plan and a coherent approach. Foreign policy that Pakistan has conducted in recent years has also been reactive, and it has also lacked initiatives. So I think a review will help to inject clarity and coherence in foreign policy and also encourage and promote a more proactive approach. I think a very important foreign policy challenge will be to try to avoid getting mired in the crosshairs of the China-US confrontation. But this is easier said than done. One has to see how best Pakistan can navigate through a period where these two global powers are engaged in intense confrontation, military competition, tech wars, trade wars, and so on. But I think what should be clear to Pakistan's policymakers is that the country's overriding priority is its relationship with China. And that's because China offers Pakistan the best opportunity or hope for the achievement of its security and economic objectives. Relations will need to be reinforced, though. I mean, you can't take this relationship for granted. You can't take any relationship for granted. So we will have to keep reinforcing this by high-level contact, progress, expedited progress on CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. So really, this is the challenge on that front. But with the United States, which is one of our critical bilateral relationships, I think we have to recognize and acknowledge that relations are at an inflection point and have been so since the US military withdrawal from Afghanistan. They need to be redefined, they need to be reconfigured, because for the last 2 decades, it was really Afghanistan that provided the basis of the relationship between our two countries, which really had very little bilateral content. So here's the challenge. I think both countries will need a great deal of imagination. You kind of have to reimagine this relationship, but in a vastly changed strategic environment which exists today, and in the context of the fact that America's strategic priority today is containment of China. So, and America has, of course, also chosen India as its partner in our region, a key partner in our region. So I think, again, we have to find the space between the Pakistan-China strategic relationship and the growing entente, if you like, between the United States and India. And I believe there is space, provided on both sides there is a desire, the political will, and the imagination to reset this relationship. I think we've seen the Biden administration adopt a somewhat detached view of Pakistan. There has been engagement, yes, but this engagement is not really sufficient enough to give our ties the kind of depth that it really needs. So this is going to be a challenge. Well, the United States is clearly interested in using or deploying India as a strategic counterweight to China. So that explains the kind of attention that Delhi is getting and Prime Minister Modi is getting from the United States. So it's very much part of America's broader strategic plan. I think for Pakistan, this growing relationship between India and the United States only poses a concern to the extent that high-tech military transfers from the US to India will obviously further destabilize our region. There is already a conventional and strategic imbalance in South Asia. And what these kinds of transfers of sophisticated equipment will do is to exacerbate that. So, I mean, the fact that they have a better relationship or a growing relationship is obviously the sovereign choice of these two countries. And I think for Pakistan, more importantly, I think, for the next government, the most vexing foreign policy issue will be how to deal with India under Prime Minister Modi, given the fact that this government in India has refused now to not just talk about Kashmir, but also has absorbed, bifurcated Jammu and Kashmir. So, as we know, formal dialogue doesn't exist right now. Trade remains suspended, tensions continue, they flare up from time to time. So really, for me, the most important near-term goal for Pakistan should be, because I don't really see dialogue being resumed anytime soon in the near term. For Pakistan, we have to look at how we can get some kind of a framework to manage tensions with India, because two nuclear neighbors clearly need to have an understanding of what to do when tensions flare up. I think one of the bright spots on an otherwise bleak landscape has been the fact that the agreement between the two countries to observe a ceasefire on the line of control, which, as you know, happened in February 2021, that has continued to hold. But overall, the environment is very fraught, and therefore one has to look at what is realizable or possible, rather than chase after objectives which are not going to happen.